Okay, so we're starting a new chapter. That's chapter Yud Daled, 14. B'chelkei Prishus, the categories, the divisions of Prishus. Right, as opposed to details of Prishus, which is said right in the end of the previous chapter. He said that Ach Mishpat Aprotim al Pi Haklal Hazeh Eino Moser El Shikul Hadas. The details are dependent on the Shikul Hadas, on the person's way, individual kind of moral compass. Ki Rabim Hem, there are too many. Ki Efshel Kabes Kol Aprotim, it's too much together, all the details, there are too many. Okay, so fine. So now, what's the difference in protim and chelokim? Just to speak out. Chelokim are, you take a principle and you divide it into categories. Within their categories, there are many details. Details are not necessarily sections. They're just particulars of each individual expression. Mashenkin chelokim, subcategories are divisions. There are divisions within a general broad principle, right? Okay, so let's see. So we're saying, what could be Chelkei Prishus? He told us, what is Prishus again? Prishus is Kadeshas Mechal Mutaloch, separate yourself from the physical world, right? Separate yourself from the physical world in order to avoid, distance yourself from Aveira, right? So it's an extra precaution. In order to distance yourself from an Aveira, so that you should not fall into an Aveira. But at the end of the day, since every element, since the whole world really is in one big Nisayan, so technically you got to remove yourself from everything. So where do you draw the line? So we said you draw the line what's necessary, what's not necessary, and that is dynamic. Meaning for one individual something's necessary, for another individual something's not necessary. So eventually you grow into a total parush, but it's a spectrum, right? But the point is that everything in the world is a potential problem, and so the ultimate definition is you take in from the world only what's absolutely necessary. Correct? Fine. So what are the divisions? What could be divisions in that? So let's see. Chelkei haprishus haroshim shloisha says that the main divisions of prishus are three. Interesting. The main divisions are three. So kihine yesh prishus bahanois. There are prishus with regards to pleasures. Prishus bidinim. There's prishus with regards to, let's call it halacha, din, min halacha, and prishus biminhagim. And there's prishus with regards to the way a person is manhig himself. Minhagim does not mean like a minhag. Minhagim over here means like the way you conduct yourself. Okay? So there are three divisions of prishus: pleasures, halacha, and minhagim. So let's see. Haprishus ba'anois, the prishus when it comes to hanois, pleasure, hu mashi is karnu perakoidim. That's the one we spoke about in the previous perek. Dehainu shloi lakachas midivrei ha'olam ela masha hatzorich echriach. That is not to take from the things of the world. Ela masha hatzorich echriach. Only what is the need makes it compulsive. Okay, a very interesting phraseology here. Is like every time he kind of changes it up a little bit. I don't know how much you want to drill into it, but the point is over here, don't take from the world except what is the tzorech, the need, yachriach, forces you. It's like
forces you.
Right. So it sounds the way it's phrased, it sounds like there's still a sort of a battle going on. Right? Meaning you're constantly, I'm assuming, since you're constantly kind of pushing the boundaries out or in, however you want to look at it, right, of prishus, and you're constantly, putting the fence out further, so what yesterday's need is no longer today's need, but today's need, you kind of fighting it a little bit, right, but you realize, no, I need it today, so I take it today. By tomorrow, I realize, no, you know what, I don't really need it, and now I moved the fence up a little bit more. That's what this language sounds like. Hatzoirich yachriach, meaning the need forces, right? As opposed to just say, ela mashe hatzorech, shetzorech.
So it's in an individual level. It's not. I understood it first as there is a basic need that is needed for everyone to survive.
Right, there is definitely
water whole year.
Well, again, Moshe Rabbeinu survived 40 days without water. And,
Right, okay,
Yaakov Avinu, didn't sleep for 14 years. I don't know, assuming that maybe you get at some point past some sort of natural levels, and Vilna Gaon slept for half an hour every 6 hours. So maybe there are boundaries that we're not even aware of. I don't know. But the point is that I'm just jumping on this language of, doesn't say what, do what you need. It says do what the need compulses you to do. So what is that language? I'm just saying, it's like, do I need it? Do I not need it? Oh, it compulses me. Okay, I need it. So it's like a constant, that's how I'm reading it. There's a constant
East to front.
Back and forth, right. There's a constant front, exactly, battlefront. Okay. V'dover zeh yakif al kol mashu tainag le'echad men achushim. And this idea includes in it anything that is pleasurable to any one of the senses. Okay? There are 5 senses, right? So we got touch, taste, hearing, sight, and smell. Okay? There are 5, right? V'hainu, and that is macholos, food, be'ilos, intercourse, malbushim, clothing, tiyulim, leisure activities like walking and traveling, b'shmuos, and hearing. V'chol k'yoytze b'zeh. So these are, if you remember, again, the previous chapter, he really mentioned all of these.
Yep.
Not in the same order, actually. In the same order. He didn't call shmuos hearing, he called shmuos conversations, like tiyulim v'diburim or something like that, right? So he called them conversations. But now since he's focusing on the chushim, on the senses, so he calls it over here shmuos, meaning, right? You're protecting your ears, right? He doesn't. So these 5 are not parallel to the 5 senses. I mean, macholos is taste, okay. Be'ilos is touch, right? Malbushim, clothing. What sense is that? It could be it could be anything, right? It's so. Tiyulim plus leisure may be a side shmuis. Maybe malbushim is smelling. I doubt it. Yeah. It's. I'm not sure. I don't know how. I'm assuming just that these 5 activities involve, a bouquet of senses, right? When you eat, it's your smell is involved, and your taste is involved, and your eyes are involved. It's 3 out of the 5 senses are involved. What is it?
You're not hearing it, you're not touching it.
Right. Okay. Well, the texture is also maybe texture, right? But that's not the point. The point is that these are the 5 pleasurable activities that people generally involved in, and these 5 pleasurable activities relate to the 5 senses that people have. Although you could argue maybe, that the sense of smell maybe is not included in this, because maybe the sense of smell is considered to be one of the more quote unquote spiritual senses. There are not too many averes that we do with the sense of smell. We smell b'samim after Havdalah. It's a physical pleasure, but it has a certain, what's the word, spiritual connotation, right? And they also say something that if you smell something pleasant, it kind of maybe opens up your brain chemistry. Again, I don't know. Whatever. That's the bottom line. Yeah. Bottom line is that you got your 5 senses, and those are your, what's the word? Your pisoski. Your basically your connection to the physical world. So that's your bottleneck. That's where you control your intake. That's where you control your intake. Fine. That's your valve. So as you go along, you close that valve. Fine. Anything similar to it. Rag b'yomim. Now here's a cool line. Again, this is one of my favorite lines here. Rag b'yomim sheha'oineg b'hem mitzvah. Except for the days that the oineg, right, the pleasure, enjoyment of these activities is a mitzvah. Okay? So again, this is very interesting here.
This is a day for casual walking, strolling.
Right, meaning right. So it's like we mentioned this a couple of times before already, but mention again that you have these days that are holy days, and yet for us during those holy days, we increase in our physical activities, and we elevate them, and so the oineg, in order to sanctify that day, we actually take more from the physical world and take more enjoyment from the physical world. You do take a walk. You do have gishmaka foods, so you enjoy the physical world, right? I'm a parish. Well, no, that's your avodas Hashem. Your avodas Hashem is to do, this is your mitzvah, right? The whole prisha is not for the sake of prisha. The whole prisha is only to do avodas Hashem. Avodas Hashem calls on you to enjoy now. Okay, right? Okay. So again, this is not like people who on Shabbos, this too much gashmis for me, and this would be a misguided, according to Ramchal, it would seem to be a misguided prishus, so to speak. When during the week they're going to stuff themselves with whatever it is that they stuff themselves with, but during Shabbos it's, whatever. Okay, fine. So let's keep going. So that's the first. So the first one, okay, we understand. It seems like a repetition mostly of the previous chapter, a summary of the previous chapter, right? But now he says, "Prishus bedinim." Now we have the second type of prishus called prishus bedinim, prishus and haloch and din. What is the prishus and din? Hu lehachmir bahem tamid, is to be machmir, take the stringent position when regards to halacha, tamid, always. So you always take the stringent position. Okay? So what does that mean? That means lochosh afilu l'divrei yochid b'machloikes in time anira, to lochosh, to how do you say, to consider, I guess, to consider.
This is consider here.
Okay, it says to over here to comply, but to basically to take the side of a minority opinion, right? Even though we don't paskin like the minority opinion, right? We have a principle called yochid v'rabim halochik rabim, right? We take the majority opinion, but if you have a majority opinion and a minority opinion, so halacha follows the majority, but you as a parush will say, I'm going to follow the minority opinion in this situation.
If that's the most stringent opinion, obviously.
Right, obviously. Right. Good point. Right, so if it's a more stringent opinion, right, I'm going to be machmir over here, even though I don't have to be machmir, I'm going to be machmir like the minority opinion, but he qualifies it, im time or nira, right, if you have a connection to it. Just to follow the minority opinion all the time, he doesn't seem to call for that. He seems to call for it like, I connect with this minority opinion, and therefore, even though the halacha follows like Rabbim, I'm going to take on this minority, to follow this minority opinion. Yeah, okay. Right, afilu shein halacha kamoisoi ubetanai. Now he makes a very important qualification. Ubetanai shelo hiya chumroi kuloi, that the chumrah should not turn into a kula. That your chumrah should not turn into a kula. Okay, so over here they bring a beautiful example from Shlomo Zalman, who gave mussar to some young man who was machmir on not to carry in Yerushalayim. He didn't hold of the Eruv in Yerushalayim. His father was not such a machmir, and his father held like the Eruv in Yerushalayim. So they were walking back from shul, I guess, or whatever it is, and he was carrying something heavy. So the father was carrying something heavy, and the son didn't, right? Because he doesn't hold of the Eruv, but his father had to schlep the package. So Shlomo Zalman said, not holding of the Eruv is a chumrah, but kibbud avim is a mitzvah deraisa. So. Right.
What are you doing?
Right. Exactly. So again, this comes back to this idea that this chassidus is a very dangerous thing, because again he's going to repeatedly give this warning that it requires what's called shikul hadas. Right. You need to have shikul means shakul, right? To wait it out. Hadas. You have to have das. Das means evaluating, assigning proper values to things, and knowing how to prioritize them. So you need to have shikul das. So that's why it doesn't, in a certain sense, people like us should be prohibited from doing these things. Why? Because we don't have shikul das. Number one, not only don't we have shikul das, we don't even have all the variables in place, because you would have to know first all of the halachas on your fingertips, right? And then you could finally figure out what's the proper, how to weigh, when to take the chayachid, when to not to take the yachid, when to know, to calculate if the kula will become a chumrah will become a kula. Like, you need to have all these cheshbonos. What do we know already, right? So, but we live in the world, again, maybe, I don't know anything, because our gedolim maybe don't, they see things differently, but we live in a world where people are very machmir on certain specific things that are very, like even you could say Chol of Yisrael or Moshe Paskin, that it's not a chumrah, right? So somebody once brought, there was in yeshiva, there was a gathering of like, it was a Thursday night learning, and some new guy in yeshiva brought like something that was in Pas Yisrael or something like that, and somebody was like, "What is this? Garbage." So
he bears the
it
guy
made the guy feel bad because So again, whatever, the young kids, obviously they don't know better, but the point is that you have to be so careful about all of these things. Fine. So moving on. Right. So again, but there is a concept of being machmir bedinim in order to take on this minority opinion. So even though halacha, right, halacha goes like one or not the other, but we have this concept called elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. So it's not like the other person's opinion is completely rejected, right? There is some sense of reality to the minority opinion too. So the parush, right, appreciates that reality. Okay, that's one. Number two, lahachmir b'sfeikos, and also to be machmir when it comes to sofek. Afilu mokum she'ef shulahakol b'hem, right? Even in places where you're allowed to be mekel, right? So, for example, right, so we have sofek d'Rabbanan l'kula. Generally, if it's an isur d'Rabbanan, if it's sofek, I'm allowed to be mekel. So a parush will say, you know what? I'm not gonna be mekel. I'm gonna be machmir. I'm going to be machmir. Okay, so what is this here? What is this? So let's see. I mean, he's going to explain. So let's see a little more. But right, this is a new preshus. This is not a preshus that was mentioned to us in the previous chapter, right? Does this have anything to do with pleasures of the physical world? No. Does this have anything to do with distance from a chet, like an extra fence? Maybe, but it doesn't sound like it. It doesn't sound like a fence, like what? Because I followed the halacha in the majority opinion, I'm going to what? And I disregard the minority opinion, then I'm going to somehow
and
full of right? It doesn't sound right. Right?
Right.
Doesn't sound right. So let's see. Let's get back to that. So our Chachamim said in Chulin, explained the statement from Yecheskel. Very strange story there. So Hashem tells Yecheskel to do certain things, like basically to lay a siege in Yerushalayim, like a model. Take a brick, draw a picture of Yerushalayim, set up a siege like a plate of toys. Then he has to lie down on his left side, and he has to eat certain foods, and then he has to cook those foods in excrement, and he has to drink with a little bit of water. Very strange things, because again, I think it's like Ramban explains that when a prophecy comes with certain specific actions, then that prophecy Hashem doesn't change that prophecy. Then it's already went into motion, and it's gone, right? So Yecheskel was basically told to do these kind of activities, and one of them is, again, like I said, is cooking with excrement. And Yecheskel wasn't too crazy about that idea, because he had to eat the food afterwards. So he wasn't too crazy about it. So one of the things he says this line, he says this line, where it says, "Hine nafshi le'metumoa," my nefesh is not unclean, right? And then he says something nevela treifa lo yachalti, and I never ate even from nevela and treifa, and I never ate from b'sar pigul, right? Lists different things that he never ate, right? So the Gemara understands that he cannot be referring to plain Isser, or you never ate non-kosher food. Okay, so every Jew never ate non-kosher food. Like, what's the big deal? If Yechezkel is kind of expressing a sentiment, then he's expressing a certain refinement. So how does the Gemara understand? The Gemara understands that Shaloi achalti mi behema shehoira b'chacham, that I did not eat from an animal upon which a chacham had to paskin. In other words, if it was a shaila,
questionable,
I didn't touch it. V'lo yachalti mi b'sar couscous, and I never ate from couscous. What's couscous? Lachus, techoisu is by Korban Pesach we have this word techoisu alaseh, that you have to shecht on a chabura, right? So techoisu is another word for shecht, for shecht. So shecht, meaning if you see an animal that's about to die, somebody says shecht before it dies. So in other words, you see that. So there's a discussion in the Gemara: is that considered a treifa or not? Right? Meaning, what's in the right? So how do we go? Nevela, we have nevela and treifa. Nevela is any animal that died without shechita. That's nevela. What is treifa? A treifa is an animal that was shechted, but it turned out to be that it was not healthy, right? Either was punctured lung or something like that. So nevela is any animal, any kosher animal that died without shechita, and treifa is any animal that was shechted but was discovered to be a treifa. There's a discussion in the Gemara if an animal that's close to dying, if that what does it have a status of a treifa? Doesn't have a status of a treifa or not? Okay, so they're learning from this Yechezkel that it's not a real treifa. That because then shech he didn't eat from it. In other words, it was a higher level. He didn't take these animals that people were running to shech because they were afraid of the animal dying, right? So that animal he did not eat. But what do we see from here? Right? Now all of these things are definitely mutter according to halacha. He was the one who was trying to be machmer, right? So again, we see here a new type of something. Again, he calls it precious. Let's say I never saw this Ramchal, I never learned Mesilas Yesharim, and I came upon this Gemara, right? Okay, I would have said, okay, there's a concept of being machmir. How would I categorize that concept of being machmir? Would I categorize him in precious? Where do I categorize him?
Why would it not be precious?
So he said something before. He said something that precious to Chasidus is like Zehirus to Zrizus, right? And Zehirus is being careful in anything that's negative, right? You take a precaution, right? So too, precious is an extra precaution. Is an extra precaution. Okay, so he understands that any extra precaution would relate to the idea of precious, right? Because you are taking an extra precaution. Okay, maybe. Let's see. He himself feels that there's a question here. I already mentioned to you previously that you can't learn, right? You can't learn from what is mutter for all Jews and apply it to Prushim. Sheyesh lehem leharchik min hakiyur, okay, because they, the Prushim, okay, so first of all, just understand that I don't know if he remember if he introduced this idea before, but I mean he did, but meaning this Prishus, right? I can be a person. Here's I am. I'm a Jew, a tzaddik, who is engaging in the midah of Prishus, right? At which point, but the ultimate goal of this midah of Prishus is that I'm going to become a Porush, right? Kedoshim to you, Prushim to you, right? So the ultimate goal of that midah, then I'm going to become a Porush, all right? So at some point, when a person just starts, so meaning, right? So there's the journey of a Porush. There's the beginning of the journey where he's starting to take on these
extra things,
right? Pushing the boundaries, right? But then at some point, he now has the character of being a Porush, right? So when he kind of turns into a Porush, then in a certain sense, it sounds like the things that are mutter to others,
automatically.
It's more than just like they're my chumras. They're my chumras, meaning they're my halachas. Meaning I created my own shulchan aruch, so to speak, and now I have to follow it because I'm on the level of this parush. So for me, once I choose to follow the minority opinion,
then it becomes
I have
the
to follow my minority opinion. Again, I'm not saying that there's no flexibility in this. I'm not saying that if he sees this minority opinion contradicting some other like chumrah, like this chumrah becomes a kula, then he has to scale back. I'm sure, but then sometimes you have to scale back on halachas also. We always weighs the pros and cons of every halacha, right? Right? If somebody can't take medicine on Shabbos, right? But if a person is sick, you could take medicine on Shabbos. If a person is not comfortable, we always calculating what's mutter and asr depending on what is the we can do malacha on a chalamoid, but on if it's hefset meruba you could there's always a calculation. So a parush basically raised the calculations on a different level, but it sounds like once he reached the level of being a parush, right? That's what he says. You cannot say it's mutter for Joe Schmo, so therefore let it be mutter for me. You can't make those analogies anymore. Once you have established yourself as a parush, then you can no longer compare yourself to the Joe Schmo. Okay, you're in your own category, and you're done with but what about him, right? Okay, fine. Moving on. So she'ein lilmod l'mashu l'kol Yisrael. You can't learn from what is mutter to all of Israel. Leprushim to Prushim. She'esh lehem l'harch min hakiyur. Now here's the interesting language. She'esh lehem l'harchik. So once they establish themselves as Prushim, they have to distance themselves from kiyur. What is kiyur? Kiyur, literally translates as ugliness. Okay. She'esh lehem l'harchik min hakiyur umin hadoime loi, and anything that's similar to it, umin hadoime ladoime, and anything that's similar to the thing that it's similar to. Okay. So there is those three levels that he told us, right? In the last chapter, he said that there are three levels. There's the isurim themselves, the prohibitions themselves. There are the fences that the chachamim set up, and then there are individual fences that the prushim start setting up for themselves. Fine, but we understood those things in what's the word, in the trajectory of gashmius. The isurim here because they're physical things, fences because we are attracted to physical things, and then finally even mutter physical things, but we see the connection, right? Now we're looking at something else. We're looking at a different gradation. We're looking at isurim themselves, but he is calling the isurim as kiyur. There's some, it's dirt, it's ugliness, right? There are the fences, which is basically saying it's too close for comfort, it's too similar to the kiyur. And then there is the individual parush, it's too similar to the similar, right? It's too, so, again, right? That's the basic layout. But what does it mean, kiyur? I mean, meaning pork, right?
Right.
Or krevetki, допустим. There was a time when I thought, wow, krevetki, wow, what delicious stuff, amazing stuff. But now I look at it and I think, oh, goddess, like it's gross. It's just bottom feeder and nastiness from the bottom of the ocean. Okay, so kiyur, fine. Although the Rambam says that a person is supposed to say, this is a delicious thing, but I'm not going to have it because HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me not to have it, right? So first of all, first question is it a kiyur? Is it ugly? Is it ugliness? That's number one. Number two is, even if it is ugliness, so why should you, what does it mean that doime and doime? What's the doime and doime, meaning similar and similar? Because, what's the word? Again, let's see the next example. We'll make it even more kind of. V'chein omer Mar Ukva. And similarly, Mar Ukva says, Ano b'hai milsa, with regards to this matter, he's going to explain what the matter is, I am chala bar chamra legabe abba. When I compare myself to my father, I'm like vinegar, son of wine. Right? My father is wine, and I'm vinegar. Meaning I'm not even like, I'm like a monkey and he's a human being. I'm not on his level at all. Why? Which matter? Be'ilu Abba, my father, kad ochel bisra ha'idna, when my father would eat meat today, lo have ochel gvina ad lemocher ki hashta. He would not eat cheese until the next day, same time. Right? If he eats the meat for dinner 6 p.m., he's not going to eat milk until 6 p.m. He kept 24 hours between milk and meat. Okay, but me, if I'm not going to eat it at this seuda, right? I'm not going to eat milk and meat at the same seuda. But at the following seuda, I'm going to eat. Okay? In other words, the halacha, meaning he follows the basic halacha, 6 hours. That's the next seuda, or whatever the shittas are. I'm not going to get into the whole different shittas. That comes from this. It's related to this Gemara of these shittas. What does it mean next seuda? Does next seuda means go wash, wait a little bit, and eat, or does it mean 6 hours like we do? Right? So let's say 6 hours. So Mar Ukva is saying, my father, he's praising his father, right? His father wouldn't eat for 24 hours between milk and meat, and I only eat right away. Now again, certainly certainly halacha is not like his father was doing, that to wait 24 hours. There's no such thing. If that was the halacha, meaning even if Mar Ukva says that's the halacha in their town, right? He would have followed it. He couldn't, right? So he's saying he knew that this is a crazy chumrah, so to speak, right? His father was machmir as a result of his prishus. That's why Mar Ukva called himself chala bar chamra. He was not as pure or not as strong as his father, who was the wine, right? Meaning what? Meaning because he wasn't a parush like his father. But meaning what? Meaning he understood. Again, it's going back to this idea that you need to know which level of prishus is right for you, and he knew, right? Mar Ukva knew that level of prishus was not for him, right? But he felt bad. He says, "I wish I had more." What's the word? More koiches against this oilam hazeh that's pulling me, right? And so that I was more of a parush, but I don't have that. So I knew he had the shikul adas to know that, hey, don't go overboard with this, right? Meaning his prishus was not ready for this, but he felt bad that he wasn't ready for it, right? Again, so let's go back to the question. There's a kiyur. What's the kiyur? The kiyur is milk and meat together. Ugh, disgusting, right? Cheeseburger, gross. Cheeseburger, gross. Okay, so we don't eat. We Jews, That's midarais. Midarabon. Not only cheeseburger is gross, it's meat for breakfast, cheese for lunch, okay, for dinner, right? Is okay, but cheese an hour later, it's too close. It's not kiyur, but there's something wrong with it. It just feels wrong. Just feels too close. Mm-hmm. You're going to eat cheese while you still have a sense of the meat is still burping up the meat. It's not right. Too close. Right? This guy says it's in the same day. I mean, I had it at 6 a.m. for breakfast. I went to a bris at 9 a.m. I had shish kebab over there, Bukhari and bris. Now, in the same 24 hours, I'm going to have meat at the same time. How could it be? It's wrong. It just feels wrong, right? It feels wrong. Now, again, does it feel wrong to me? Absolutely not.
Same.
Absolutely not. So here, what I'm saying is, what we see here, I think, is more than just, I don't know how to say this. But I don't know how to say this, but it's more than just a precaution. It's like
it's like a new way of life.
No, but I'm saying, it's been 10 hours since I ate meat. For Marukva's father, it's been 10 hours since he ate his shish kebab. He's about to have his coffee with milk, right? And he says to himself, "This is against the Kodesh Baruch Hu, what I'm doing now." You understand? Because he sees the tentacles, so to speak, the extensions of Basar B'chalav in that connection. That then the same day, I'm going to have milk and meat, meaning so.
It's allowed.
This
but
is where
how far it goes.
Right, but this is where, so to speak, quote unquote Chassidus kind of comes in. I mean, right? Prishus is
right.
Chassidus.
You have to have
meaning,
an eye and a
right, but it's more right. Meaning, but it's more than that. Meaning, the idea of a Chassid is you're serving a Kodesh Baruch Hu out of love, right? So Hashem, right? So Hashem said, "Don't do this," right? So I don't know. Again, example. Okay, a husband and wife, they love each other. If people who love each other, they don't punch each other in the face. Okay, now you don't come to yourself, hon, I'm really a great husband. I haven't punched you even once today. That's not even like it's true. That's the halacha. That's the law, so to speak, right? But that's just like so. The laws of the Torah, in some sense, are minimal for all of Klal Yisrael, right? This individual is saying, "Hey, I understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants more than this. He just can't speak it out. He doesn't want to speak it out. So, but he understands not only Kol HaTorah Kula, but by this point, he sees the kind of the spiritual between the lines and the Kabbalistic and all that stuff. So that's why there's a transition happening over here between the lines of Ramchal, which maybe he doesn't speak out, is that it's not just, I see the physical world as an Yisayim, and so I'm going to keep it away. It makes me too soft and whatever, right? And all the things that he said. He's saying now, he's understanding that right. He's trying to. Meaning, there's a person who understands. Why is the Kodesh Baruch Hu answering Basar B'chalav? I mean, you can look at guys. I have no idea why. But the Gedolim that are on this level, they're sensing on their spirit, with their spiritual whatever it is sensors, that there is something else here. There is more that meets the eye, and they're seeing the tentacles of the Isser Basar B'chalav kind of extending beyond, right? And so they're like, right? They're saying we are cleansing ourselves completely from anything that resembles the Isser that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is asking us to avoid, right? Because it's a much more of a personal connection with God. They're seeing now why God doesn't want this thing. And so, in order to please God, they're taking these extra, right, exactly. So that's where this precious minadinim comes in. It's more than just separating from the physical pleasures, which we understand makes you a lower level person. It's also appreciating the quote unquote the nitzoitzos of tuma that are spread out in the different parts of the physical world based on the dinim that are in the Torah, and that's the kiyur and the doima and the doima. Okay, fine. Let's keep going. So now finally we get to the third prishus. Prishus b'minhagim hu hizboidedus. Okay, so again, so prishus b'minhagim means prishus in conduct, right? The way a person is manhig himself. So how do you achieve precious when it comes to minhagim? So he says who his boydedus. So that is this beautiful Hasidic word, which means his boydedus. How do we translate his boydedus? Seclusion. Okay, his boydedus, isolation, seclusion. Va'hevdal, and separation mina chevra hamidinis, from social interaction. Okay, chevra hamidinis. Okay, so fine. Lefanois liboy el havoida. Why? To turn his heart towards God's service. V'his boinanus bokiroi, and to contemplate it properly. Okay, now let's again dwell on this for a second, right? So this is let's give it a name, hermit, right? So this is her becoming a hermit, right? So on one hand, again, just forget Ramchal, forget Torah, forget anything. We see a person who is isolated, meditative, isolated person. Right away, we kind of instinctively we're programmed to say, there's got to be some ruchnius there, right? There's a certain right. A person who's just constantly a social butterfly, we automatically assume a flaky, kind of light level person. Individual, secluded, meditative, contemplating. Right, so we instinctively we kind of understand the concept, fine. But however, when we go to like a siyum hashas, right, and everybody screams Shema Yisroel Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, 90,000 people. I mean, wow, you're inspired. You feel like this is like ruchnius, right? Your heart opens up, and you're like with 90,000 people. So when do we get ruchnius? Do we get ruchnius when we are all by ourselves? Or do we get ruchnius when we are in a group? Right? When is our height? When is peak ruchnius achieved? When we are in a group, screaming together, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, when we are alone in our basement, contemplating. Right. Which one is it? Right. So I mean, the answer is it's both. Obviously, clearly, I mean, we're experiencing both. Of course, when do you know which one is which? So I know there's a Maimar Parchaditz. I don't remember all the details of it. Just remember the punchline. I guess is that when we are expressing ruchnius, right? When you go to a concert, when we are just expressing ruchnius, it's better in a group. But when we are internalizing ruchnius, right? When you have to work out an idea, when you have to like get to the bottom of something, you can't do it in a group, right? If you want to research something, you have to separate yourself from the group and it's just drill down, right? When you just already drilled down and now you want to just bring it out, so to speak, then in a group it's like, each person elevates the next person, right? So hive mind or whatever they want to call it. Okay, so that's why he says over here, right? If you want to get to the bottom of avodas Hashem, the only way to do it is boidus, is to go by yourself and to contemplate. But again, very important, ubitanai, on the condition, that you will not incline yourself in this to the other extreme, right? You can't. So even though I said a hermit is not a great word; it's a terrible word. because Shikvar Omru Zichronim Lebracha, because our sages says Le'olam Tiheidaita Shel Odom Meureves Mabriyas. A person's das has to be always Meureves, has to be always intermixed with creations, right? In other words, you have to associate with the people. You still have to be Achad Ha'am. You have to be one of the people. You have to be connected with their plight, with their feelings. You have to be empathized. If you're completely torn away from the world, then you're a loner, but you're not a human. That's not what Hashem wants. Hashem wants you to be a lofty human being, not just a lofty whatever. Right? You have to be Muravis and Mabrias. V'chein omru cherev el abadim v'noyalu. So this is again a pasuk in Yirmiyahu that says that sword, literal translation I think is sorcerers, to the sorcerers of Bavel or whatever, v'noyalu, and they should become foolish. So by the Gemara Darshans, which is what's the important part over here, cherev al soineim shel talmidei chachamim, a sword for the haters of Talmidim Chachamim. Again, that's just a euphemism for Talmidei Chachamim. Sheyoshvim bad bevad ve'oiskim b'Torah, that sit individually and learn Torah, right? So there is an element of learning alone, but there is an element of learning with a group. Ela yischaber ha'odom im ha'tovim. So a person should connect, should associate with the good kind of people. Zman ma, whatever time. Shemitztorich loy lelimudah, that's necessary for him to learn. Right, so you get a chavrusa, you go to a shir, you go to whatever you need in order to achieve your learning. Oile farnasosa, for your parnasa, v'yizboided achar kach, and then you seclude yourself lehidovik belakov in order to cling to God, ulehasik darkei yoisher, and to reach the darkei hayoisher, to the ways of straightness, v'avoid hamitis, and true avoid. Right, so fine. So a new preshus is separating yourself from social interactions. But then he says more. Included in this is also to be memayit in speech, right? And to be careful with idle chatter, and not to peer and look outside a person's daled ames, right? In other words, you are
your own daled ames.
What?
Your own
daled ames. Yeah, right. You are completely right. Torn. Right. You're removing yourself from the physical world. Right? You're taking in less and less. So less. Okay. B'chol k'yoytze b'zeh, and anything similar to this. Min ha'inyanim. Now, I don't know, let's see how your version translates this. I wish I would have brought my version, but Mikol k'yoytze b'zeh, min ha'inyonim, of matters, sheha'odom margel asatzmai b'hem, of matters that a person habituates himself with, at shenyeshorim lo b'teva otnoisim, until they become natural to his movements. So that ending is a little difficult to read, right? He says, he lists certain things that you're not that a porish does, right? What is it? He minimizes his speech, right? He avoids idle chatter, small talk, and he doesn't look outside of his daled ames, and similar things that a person habituates himself to until they become second nature to him. So which things does a person habituate himself to? The looking outside of his daled ames, or the not looking outside of his daled ames? What does it say by you?
It says not gazing beyond one's forearm.
Right, keep reading.
All other such things which relate to matters that becomes habitual to a person until they become second nature.
Right. So they make it very vague.
Exactly. Same.
So very literal translation. So, but over here in the Art Scroll, this is how they translate it. Anything of this nature that is included in practices to which a person can accustom himself, and one should do this. They add this in parentheses, so to speak. One should do this until such practices become natural and reflexive to him. Right?
You should do this until it becomes.
Right. which I think is really the better read. The other Mesilas Yesharim that I have at home actually reads it the other way around. That there is no reason for a person to look outside his dalanamas, but they become second nature to him because he doesn't think about it. But if he would practice, he could turn back the tide, so to speak. But that's not. I don't think that's the right read. I think the right read is more like the art scroll that says that a person should do this until eventually they just become natural. Fine. So over here they have a beautiful phrase from Shlomo Vol, but they say, he says that if not for the night we would not know the stars. If not for the night we would not know the stars. So what does that mean? It means that the night is a time when you can go to a secluded place, look up in the sky and see the stars. But if we wouldn't have the night, if we just have the day, we would never experience that experience of gazing up at a night sky and seeing its awesomeness, right? So meaning if a person doesn't have a chance to seclude himself and sort of contemplate and introspect, then he's gonna never experience that awesomeness that opens up when a person really kind of separates. Right. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Okay. Now these three categories, even though I told you them in short principles, you should see you should see that they actually include many actions from various actions of people. Okay, meaning there are many particulars that are connected to these principles. Okay. And I already told you, right, as which we started with, right, you cannot give over the protim. There are just too many of them. Kim l'shikul hadas, it is up to the shikul hadas lehaishir oisom, to straighten them out al yoisher haklal ve'amitoy, upon the kind of the straightness of the principles and its true goals. Right? So in other words, again, this is beautiful, I think, because it brings in this idea of Yosher. Right? The book, we have to remind ourselves, the book is called Mesilas Yesharim. Right? So in other words, so if you want to achieve the Kedusha, the one midah that is going to constantly be coming back that you're going to need is Yashrus. Right? Because this Chasidus that you were finding ourselves in is based on Shikul Hadas. Your Shikul Hadas, like we said, we need all the variables. Once you have all the variables, you need to be able to assign value. Once you assign value, you need to be able to then do the interpretation and the math assessment and figure out what to do. Right? If you don't have Yashrus, so stop. You don't belong here.
Right, you
don't belong here.
Left and right, things that.
Right, you don't have Yashrus, so your values are going to be assigned improperly, and when you're going to add them up, you're going to be improperly. So you need, and it seems like now the question is, can you teach Yashrus? As that person doesn't have Yashrus, and I think we discussed this question before. A person doesn't have Yashrus, so what does he do? Where does he do? Right. So, but he did say right previously, he did say something like this. He said, "V'izboideid," right? Achar kach, and then seclude yourself, lidobek bilakov, to connect, to cling to your God, ulehasig darkei hayoisher, and to reach the ways of straightness. So it does sound like in Echanami, a person may not be starting out with straightness, but if a person is learning and contemplating, the Torah will eventually straighten him out. But I think what's going to be important, and maybe this is not sufficiently, you have to be constantly asking yourself this question: am I, quote unquote, being straight? Am I being biased? Right? Am I
doing the right thing?
You have to be constantly reassessing your straightness, so to speak, so that you don't mess up, because that's going to be your key platform upon which everything else, all the other midas are going to have. If you don't check your straightness, again, no pun intended, but you're gonna have problems, right? And especially when it comes to Chassidus, when everything is going to be dependent on Shikol Hadas, and you can't, and you're now in your uncharted territories. There's nobody. Like I said, you can't go to Joe and Shmuel and say, but he does it, so I can do it. No, you're in your own world now. So you kind of mess up on your own. You assign values on your own. You make fences on your own. So it's very easy to find yourself off the wall and big problems, right? So sometimes maybe it's okay, be it tzaddik and okay, good enough. I mean, again, Baruch Hashem, we don't have such problems. All right? We're still, we're not there yet. But the question is, again, we live in a world where chumras are very commonplace. So does that mean they're wrong? What would Ramchal say? I don't know. I did hear, let's say, from a couple of Shurim of Herschel Schechter, that it sounded like criticism against the Mishnah Brura. The Mishnah Brura introduced this approach of being machmir for minority opinions sometimes, la halacha. And he thought that wasn't traditional Ashkenaz derech. Traditional Ashkenaz derech, you have to come out with the conclusion of what the halacha is and stick to it. You're going to be machmir. Like we see that every chumrah, perhaps on a societal level, may produce a kula down the road, or a negative side effect. So yeah. I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's Yashrus that's going to be important. Like, remember, Rabbi already mentioned this, right? We learn from Yaakov Avinu when he went up to get the bracha from Yitzchak, right? We learn from Yaakov Avinu. He says, "Who are you?" He said, "Ani Esav b'charecha." I am who I am, right? Rashi Dar. But Esav is your bechor, right? Also, we see from here that it's not Yaakov is ish emes, right? We see from here that since Yaakov is ish emes, so that's not called lying, because if my words can be interpreted one way, even though I mean it the other way, so clearly that's not called lying. So therefore, everybody's out there figuring out how to construct their words so as to lie in a kosher way, right? It's completely ludicrous. It's totally wrong. It's 100%. When you lie in a way that the person misunderstands, but you have a different meaning, it is 100% sheker. It is osir, period. That's it, right? But Yaakov did it? No, Yaakov was allowed to lie. He could have said, I am Esav. Esav am I, whatever. It doesn't make a difference. He could have said whatever he wanted. Yaakov, because he was ish emes, even in a situation where he was permitted to lie, he said his words in a way that was minimized the lie as much as possible. That's his ish emes. That's a level, right? He would never, when he was not permitted to lie, he would never misconstrue his words, because that's wrong.
Right, never
right?
heard.
Again, so if you don't have Yashrus, so your Yiddishkeit, quote unquote, can be, you give yourself a license to lie. As long as I just have to figure out how to say it in a tricky way. But that's not true. That's a lie. And the Torah says, you can't do that, right? So, yeah. So, but if you have right, so if you have Yashrus, you realize something doesn't feel Yasher about this. This can't be Yiddishkeit. If I lie all the time, it can't be Yiddishkeit. Something's wrong here. So your Yashrus will straighten you out. And if you don't have Yashrus, if you learn sufficient amount of time, you will wake up and you will say, okay, 1 second. Eventually somebody will enlighten you, and you'll say, okay, you know what? This makes sense. And so you recalibrate. But at the end of the day, it's it's Yashrus that's the Ikar quality. Okay.